All right, so we're going to take a look at Chapter 10 here, which is another pretty quick and easy chapter. It deals with the idea of authority. Now, you know that we're always using authority in one sense or another. If you're writing a paper, you're doing research, you're relying upon the stuff that other people have done, and you're trusting that what that person has written or has told you is adequate. And so there's no problem with using authority. We kind of have to do it. In any term paper that you write or anything like that, you're going to have to cite particular books, websites, interviews, and so on. And so these authorities become a natural part of what we use to rely upon. But they have to be genuine authorities. If not, then of course you deal with the problem of creating a fallacy. So I wanted to look first off at what is it that makes an authority genuine. So there's two basic criteria here. First, one must be an acknowledged expert or author in the field of study in question. So if you are going to be considered a genuine authority, then you have to be somebody that's actually known or acknowledged as an expert in that field. And secondly, the claim given by the authority must concern a settled issue, not one that's still in debate. It can't be a question of what I feel like doing, what I think is the case. It has to be, this is an issue that has been settled, and I'm giving you, through my authority, what we know about this issue. So if you meet both of those criteria, then it is a case of genuine authority. But if you fail on either count, then it would be a fallacy to rely upon that person for their authority. So if you were maybe doing a research paper into quantum theory for a science class, then looking at someone like Stephen Hawking or Brian Greene, these might be good authorities for you to use. If, on the other hand, you went and interviewed your mechanic, even though he may, be somewhat knowledgeable in that area, maybe he's read a lot in that area, who knows, he's not an acknowledged expert in that field. So you want to make sure, of who it is that you're dealing with. Is this somebody whose voice is going to be taken seriously? And, of course, it also, when it comes to the question of whether or not it's a settled issue, if you want to talk about, for example, proving the existence of God, talking to the Pope wouldn't be any better than talking to Richard Dawkins, because the issue is one that's unsettled, regardless of how highly these individuals might be held in their own circles. They're talking about something that's an unsettled issue, hence it would not be considered a case of genuine authority. So again, for genuine authority, you must be an acknowledged expert in the field, and the claim has to be given with regards to a settled issue, not one that is still up in the air. And so, if we look at fallacies then, there are a couple different fallacies associated with this, but the main one is what we call an appeal to unqualified authority. And that is simply to accept someone as an authority when they are not, because the author speaks or lacks credibility. That's an appeal to unqualified authority. Just to give you an example here, Dr. Bradshaw, our family physician, has stated that the creation of muonic atoms of deuterium and tritium hold the key to producing a sustained nuclear fusion reaction at room temperature. In view of Dr. Bradshaw's expertise as a physician, we must conclude that this is indeed true. Now, I'm sure that Dr. Bradshaw is a very good nose, ear, and mouth guy. He probably knows what he's talking about in the field of medicine. But does that necessarily mean that in terms of nuclear fission, nuclear science, that this is a guy we should be listening to? Probably not. This is not the type of person that would be, a great authority for us in that respect. Old Mrs. Ferguson, who is practically blind, has testified that she saw the defendant stab the victim with a bayonet while she was standing in the twilight shadows 100 yards from the incident. Therefore, members of the jury, you must find the defendant guilty. Well, here again, when you're looking at a court case, you want those people to give testimony based upon what they saw. But if it is true that old Mrs. Ferguson is practically blind, then that doesn't really make her an overly credible witness in this particular instance, and it would be a fallacy to rely upon her as a genuine authority with regards to what has happened. We also have, in association with this, that's sort of the main issue, is unqualified authority, but we also have a few other fallacies that are associated here. One of those is what we're going to call the appeal to popularity fallacy, also many times called the bandwagon argument. If everybody else is doing it, then it must be right. If everybody else is doing it, then you should too. Everyone nowadays is on a low-carb diet, therefore you should go on a low-carb diet too. Right? How many commercials try to sell you in that type of an idea? Well, they're saying jump on the bandwagon, do what everybody else is doing. But just because everybody else is doing it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for you. Practically everybody believes in life after death, therefore you should believe in life after death too. Just because everybody else believes in something doesn't necessarily prove that it's true. You still should expect evidence before embracing or accepting a concept like that. We have another one which is called an appeal to tradition, which basically says if something is tradition, then it's always been that way, and so it must continue to be that way. But this is always a fallacy. Appeal to tradition will always be a fallacy. Just because we've always done something doesn't necessarily mean that we should always continue to do it. Serving turkey on Thanksgiving Day is a long-standing tradition, therefore we should serve turkey next Thanksgiving. Well, yes, people have been serving turkey on Thanksgiving for well over 100, 150 years, ever since Thanksgiving came into being. But does that necessarily mean that it's what has to be served on that day? What if you chose to go vegetarian or go vegan? Maybe you were instructed to do so for your health. Maybe you wanted to do so for moral reasons. Does that mean that you're wrong to not have turkey on Thanksgiving? So just because something has always been a certain way doesn't necessarily mean that it's the way it has to be. We have another one which your book isn't mentioning that's like this. It's called an appeal to snobbery. And basically, the appeal to snobbery says that you want to be part of an elite group. You want to be part of an inner clique. You want people to take you as someone who's a cut above everyone else. And therefore, you should do what this elite group of people are doing. So consider this advertisement. The Lexus 400 series is not for everyone. Only those with considerable means and accomplishment will acquire one. To show the world that you are among the select few, you will want to purchase and drive one of these distinguished automobiles. And so that Lexus 400 series is not something that the average person is going to want to go in and get, is going to be able to go in and get. Instead, this is a product that only an elite group of people can have. But whether or not it's an appeal to the masses or an elite clique, neither one is proof that you should accept the argument. The evidence has to come to you in that logical pattern that we've talked about all throughout this course. And it has nothing whatsoever to do with whether everybody else is doing it or this elite group of people is doing it. It has to do with, do I have the evidence? So appeal to snobbery, appeal to tradition, appeal to the popularity, these are always fallacies. And of course, the appeal to unqualified authority would come into play if you do not meet any of the criteria that we talked about at the beginning. So let's take a look on page 150, and we'll see here that at 10-1, number 1, it says, the following are appeals to authority. For each one, tell whether it is legitimate or fallacious. And so look at A. A says, I've been having trouble getting my lawn to grow. The grass is not very thick, and in some spots there's really no grass at all. But yesterday, while watching television, I saw Don Shula, the coach of the Miami Dolphins, and he recommended this special new lawn fertilizer from Hyponex. He says that it's great stuff, and that it will do wonders for your lawn. Well, Don Shula is a very bright guy and perhaps the best football coach in the National Football League. Since he thinks Hyponex is the best lawn fertilizer, I'm going to get some. It must be good stuff. Well, there is definitely an appeal to authority here. We're relying upon the expertise of Don Shula. But the question is it a legitimate or a fallacious example? In this case, it would be a fallacy. This would be the fallacy of unqualified authority, because Don Shula, despite his expertise with football, may have nothing in terms of knowledge when it comes to lawn fertilizers. So he is simply a paid endorsement and nothing more. Take a look at B. You remember our argument about how to amend the U.S. Constitution. We were arguing about how many states must approve an amendment in order to pass it. Well, I've settled that question. I just talked to former U.S. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor and to Ronald Dworkin, professor of constitutional law at New York University, and they both agreed that amendments to the Constitution must be approved by 3/4 of the states. Okay, so we are relying upon the authority of Ronald Dworkin, professor of constitutional law, and Sandra Day O'Connor, former Supreme Court Justice, with regards to a question about the Constitution. So those two people certainly would be perceived as experts within the field. This is an issue that is a resolved issue, and so we would say that this is a legitimate example of authority. All right? So I'm going to let you guys try the rest of those. So on page 150, number 1, you just want to do C through G. And again, all you have to do is it a legitimate or is it a fallacy? Read through it, decide whether it's a legitimate example or a fallacious example of authority. Again, there'll be a spot on Blackboard where you can submit that, or you can email it to me if you're more comfortable doing it that way. All right. In addition, don't forget that you do have your second exam today, or this week rather. It is up there on Blackboard, and you will need to have that completed by Friday at midnight. All right. So have a good week. If you have any questions, of course, feel free to let me know. Take care.